I never thought that morning would be the last time I'd wake up beside Lucas, the man I'd loved since we were teenagers. But life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs, doesn't it? My name is Grace, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought would last forever. That day is still clear in my memory. Lucas had already been up for a while. The scent of fresh coffee hung in the air as I made my way downstairs, still wearing my old fuzzy slippers. I spotted him in the kitchen. He was standing by the counter, his back facing me, shoulders slightly slumped forward. Something in the way he stood, it felt off. There was tension, like a rope pulled too tight. "Morning, babe," I greeted him, trying to stifle a yawn as I shuffled into the room. "You're up early." When he turned around, his expression hit me like ice water. His eyes were bloodshot, tired, and there was a distance in them that hadn't been there before. It was as if he was looking at me, but not seeing me at all. "We need to talk, Grace," he said in a tone so flat it felt like the ground beneath me shifted. Those words. How I've come to dread them. I forced a laugh, hoping to break the uneasy silence. "Why so serious? Did you forget to pay the bills again?" But Lucas didn't laugh. His grip tightened around the coffee mug in his hands, like he needed it to keep steady. "I can't do this anymore," he muttered. For a moment, it felt like everything stopped. "Do what?" I asked, though deep down, I already knew. Maybe I had known for a while, but I hadn't wanted to face it. Us. His hand moved in a vague gesture between us. "I'm done, Grace. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not." His words landed like weights I wasn't ready to carry. "What are you talking about? Everything is fine. We're fine." The words sounded hollow, even to me. Lucas set his mug down with a quiet clink. "Are we really fine? Because from where I'm standing, we haven't been fine for a long time. And I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being the target of your family's jokes and cruelty. I can't sit there and watch you laugh with them, not standing up for me. I can't love someone who won't defend me." His words pierced through me, and I couldn't find a way to respond. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but every word he said felt too true. "Lucas, I started to speak, but he interrupted me. "No, Grace, don't. I've heard it all before. They don't mean it. They're just like that. You're overreacting. I'm tired of being told I'm too sensitive. I'm tired of feeling like a joke to your family, like I don't matter." Tears began to blur my vision. "But you do matter. You've always mattered. I love you." He let out a bitter chuckle, but it was devoid of warmth. "Do you? Because love isn't supposed to feel like this. It's not supposed to make someone feel worthless." I reached out, trying to close the distance between us. "We can fix this. We can talk. I'll tell my family." But Lucas shook his head and took a step back. "It's too late for that, Grace. I've given you so many chances. I've begged you to stand up for me, to see how much this hurts, but you never did. And now, I've got nothing left to give." His voice held a kind of finality that terrified me. This wasn't a fight. This was something else entirely. "What are you saying?" I whispered, my heart sinking. He met my eyes, a strange mix of sadness and determination in his gaze. "I'm saying goodbye, Grace. I'm leaving." The world around me seemed to blur. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real, not with Lucas, not after everything we'd been through. "You can't just leave," I blurted out, my voice cracking. "We've been together since high school. We're married. You can't walk away from that." But Lucas just looked at me, his expression softening, though it did nothing to ease the ache inside me. "I can, Grace, and I am. I'm sorry. I really am. But I deserve better than this. So do you." Without another word, he turned and left the kitchen. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing. He was packing. He was really leaving. I don't know how long I stood there, numb and unable to move. Eventually, I made myself go upstairs. When I stepped into the bedroom, Lucas was calmly packing his things, folding shirts and placing them in his suitcase like it was just another day. "You can't do this," I said, my voice shaky. "Please, Lucas, we can fix this. I'll be better. I'll stand up to them. I'll be the wife you deserve." Lucas paused for a moment, then gently pulled his arm away from my grasp. "Grace, I wish I could believe that, but I've waited for years. I've waited for you to show me that I matter. You never did. It's not too late, I insisted, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. We love each other. That has to mean something. He stopped packing for a second, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his decision. When he turned to face me, there were tears in his eyes. Sometimes love isn't enough, Grace. Sometimes you have to love yourself enough to leave. Those words hit me harder than I thought possible. My legs gave out, and I sank down onto the bed, staring at the floor, my thoughts spinning out of control. Where are you going to go? I asked quietly. Lucas zipped his suitcase, the sound too loud in the suffocating silence. I'm going to stay with Sophia for a while. Sophia? I repeated, barely able to believe what I was hearing. The new neighbor, the blonde who had just moved in next door, the one who always seemed to find reasons to be outside when Lucas was in the yard? My heart twisted painfully. Are you leaving me for her? I managed to ask, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Lucas shook his head, but the guilt in his eyes was undeniable. No, it's not like that. She's just a friend. She's offering me a place to stay while I figure things out. But even as he said it, I could feel the lie creeping in. Maybe nothing had happened yet, but it was only a matter of time. I could feel it. Please, I whispered, the word barely escaping my throat. Please don't go. Lucas hesitated, his eyes locking with mine for what felt like an eternity. There was something there, regret, maybe even a flicker of hope, but whatever it wasn't enough. He picked up his suitcase and walked out. I'm sorry, he said softly as he left. The front door closed behind him with a hollow thud that echoed through the empty house. I stayed in that room, motionless. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time didn't seem to exist anymore. It was the sound of my phone ringing that finally broke through the fog in my mind. For a brief second, I hoped it might be Lucas, calling to say he'd changed his mind. But when I checked, the screen showed my mother's name. Grace, are you home? Why aren't you answering the door? Her voice jarred me back to reality. What are you talking about, Mom? I've been outside knocking for 10 minutes. Are you all right? No, I wasn't all right. My husband had just left me, and my entire life was in pieces. But what I said instead was, yeah, Mom, I'll be right there. I hung up, somehow dragging myself to the door. When I glanced in the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman looking back. Puffy eyes, disheveled hair, a shadow of the person I used to be. Opening the door, I was greeted by my mother's concerned expression. Grace, you look awful. What's going on? I wanted to tell her everything, but all I could manage was a weak, I'm fine, Mom. Just a rough night. She clicked her tongue, shaking her head. Where's Lucas? Did he let you sleep in on a weekday? At the sound of his name, the wall I'd built up started to crack. He's gone, Mom. He's gone. Gone? She repeated, her eyes wide with confusion. What do you mean? Where did he go? The floodgates opened. I couldn't hold it back any longer. Tears streamed down my face as I gasped, Mom, he's gone. Lucas left. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and for a few moments, she just stared at me. Then, to my utter astonishment, she let out a short laugh. Oh, honey, she said, patting my arm as if I were being dramatic. Don't be ridiculous. Lucas wouldn't leave you. He doesn't have it in him. He's probably just having one of his little episodes again. You know how easily he gets worked up. Her dismissiveness made something snap inside me. It's not a tantrum, Mom. He packed his things, he said goodbye, and he walked out. He's really gone. Her expression shifted. Confusion flickered across her face, only to be quickly replaced by something else. Something almost like relief? Well, she said briskly, her voice changing. Maybe that's for the best. You could do a lot better than Lucas, sweetheart. I've always thought so. I stared at her, my mind reeling. Better than Lucas? Mom, Lucas is amazing. He's smart, kind, and has stood by me through everything. How could you say that? She waved her hand dismissively. Grace, you've always seen him through rose-colored glasses. Sure, he's nice enough, but he's never been husband material. Always with his nose in a book, never able to fix things around the house. A real man should be able to take care of his home, his family. Her words were like cold water splashing in my face, sharp and unexpected. Suddenly, it was as if a veil had been lifted, and I saw everything clearly, every jab, every joke, every time my family had undermined Lucas. I had ignored it. I had let them do it. And Lucas, he had been right all along. "Stop it," I said quietly, my voice barely audible. "What was that, dear?" my mother asked, leaning closer. "I said stop it," I snapped, my voice gaining strength. "Stop talking about him like that. Lucas is better than any of us. He's gentle, thoughtful, and he's loved me without fail. And what did I do? I let you and Dad treat him like he was nothing. I stood by, and I let it happen." Her face hardened as she tried to interrupt. "Now, Grace, I didn't mean—" But I wasn't done. Years of frustration and shame spilled out before I could stop them. "No, you don't get to explain it away. You've been cutting him down for years. Him and his quiet way, his kindness. Just because he wasn't some handyman, you decided he wasn't man enough. And I let you. I didn't stand up for him. I told him he was too sensitive, that it wasn't a big deal. But it was. It mattered. He mattered. And now I've lost him because I wasn't strong enough to fight for him." I was shaking by the time I finished, my hands balled into fists at my sides, my breath coming fast. My mother stood there, mouth slightly open, at a loss for words. "Grace," she finally managed, her voice hesitant. "We never meant—" "I don't care," I cut her off. "I really don't want to hear it right now. Not today. I think it's best if you leave. I need to be alone." For a brief moment, I thought she might protest, but then she seemed to think better of it. She nodded stiffly, turning toward the door. Just as she was about to leave, she paused and looked back at me. "For what it's worth," she said softly. "I'm sorry." Then she was gone, and I was alone again, standing in the quiet house that suddenly felt far too big and far too empty. I leaned against the door, feeling utterly drained. Without Lucas here, the house didn't seem the same. It was just a space, hollow and cold. I wandered through the rooms aimlessly, my fingers brushing over the things he'd left behind. His coffee cup still sat on the counter, half empty. The book he'd been reading remained on his nightstand, and his favorite sweater was draped over the back of the couch. Every corner of the house felt like a reminder of what I had let slip through my fingers. Eventually, I ended up in our home office. Now, just my office, I suppose. Lucas's desk was as neat and organized as ever. I ran my hand across the smooth wood, thinking of all the nights he had sat here, working late so that I could chase my dreams. A small, leather-bound notebook caught my eye, tucked away in the corner of his desk. I had never seen it before. Curious, I picked it up and opened the first page. It was a journal, Lucas's journal. The first entry was from 3 years ago, right after we'd gotten married. With trembling hands, I began to read. "Today was tough. Grace's family came for dinner. Her brother joked about my soft hands again, said a real man should have calluses." Grace laughed. "I wish she wouldn't laugh. I wish she could see how much it hurts. But I love her. That has to be enough." Tears filled my eyes as I flipped through the pages, each entry more heartbreaking than the last. All the little cuts, the quiet wounds, the slow erosion of our relationship. He had seen it all, felt it all, and I hadn't even noticed. The last entry was dated just a week ago. "I can't keep doing this. I love Grace, but I'm losing myself. Piece by piece, I'm disappearing, and I don't know how to stop it. Sophia says I deserve better, and maybe she's right. I just wish Grace could see what's happening. I wish she cared enough to change." I closed the journal, feeling as though the air had been sucked out of the room. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind to his pain? In that moment, I made a choice. I couldn't undo the past, but I could try to change the future. I could be better, the person Lucas had always believed I could be. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed his number. "Hello?" His voice was quiet, weary. "Lucas," I began, my voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I know I can't undo what's happened, but I've read your journal. I finally understand everything, and I want to make it right. Please, if you'll give me the chance." The silence on the other end was deafening. I was afraid he wouldn't answer, afraid I'd lost him for good. But after what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. "It's not that simple, Grace. You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to how it was." "I know," I whispered, wiping away the tears that had started to fall again. "I know it's not that easy, but I want to try. I want to be better. For you. For us. If there's still Annis to fight for." Another long silence followed. I held my breath, waiting, hoping. "Grace," Lucas said, his voice soft and hesitant. "I don't know if there's anything left to fight for. So much has happened. Words are just words without actions to back them up." His words hit hard, but I wasn't ready to give up. "I understand, and I know I haven't earned another chance, but I love you, Lucas. More than anything. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to prove that to you." There was a quiet rustle on the other end, like he was running his hand through his hair, something he always did when he was deep in thought. "What about your family?" he finally asked. "They're part of the reason we're here. I won't go back to being their target." I took a deep breath. I stood up to my mother just now. I told her how wrong they've all been about you. I told her how I've failed you by not standing up for you sooner. "You did?" His surprise was unmistakable. "I did," I confirmed, swallowing back the lump in my throat. "And that's just the beginning. I'm not letting them treat us like this anymore. If they can't respect you, they don't deserve to be part of our lives. It's that simple." The silence that followed was different this time. When Lucas spoke again, his voice carried a weight of emotion that hadn't been there before. "Grace, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said quickly. "I know I have to show you, and I will. Just let me try." The pause stretched on so long that I began to think the call had been cut off. But then, finally, Lucas's voice broke the silence. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, Grace. I can't make any promises, but I'm willing to try, to give us one more chance." The relief that washed over me was overwhelming, making it hard to speak. "Thank you," I whispered, tears spilling down my face. "Thank you, Lucas. I swear this time I won't let you down." "I really hope not," he said, his voice carrying a mix of hope and exhaustion. "Because this is it, Grace. If things don't change—" "They will," I interrupted, desperate for him to believe me. "They already have. I swear to you, things will be different." We stayed on the phone for a while longer, talking about what came next. We planned to meet the next day to discuss everything properly. When we finally hung up, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in what felt like forever. But I knew the hard part was just beginning. Words were easy. It was my actions that would matter now. I needed to prove to Lucas and to myself that I could be the person he deserved. The following weeks were a blur of upheaval and adjustment. True to my word, I stood up to my family. It wasn't smooth sailing. There were shouting matches, tears, and slammed doors. But I held firm. I still remember the look on my father's face when I confronted him about how he had treated Lucas over the years. "Now listen here," he began, his face turning a shade of red I hadn't seen before. "I've tolerated more than enough from that boy, but—" "No, Dad," I cut him off, my voice steady. "You've said enough. Lucas isn't a boy. He's a good man. He's loved and supported me in ways you can't even begin to understand. If you can't respect him, if you can't treat him with the decency he deserves, then you won't be part of our lives. It's as simple as that." He stared at me, stunned. "You'd choose him over your own family?" he asked, clearly bewildered. "Absolutely," I replied, without a moment's hesitation. "Lucas is my family. He's the person I chose, and it's high time I started acting like it." But standing up to my family wasn't the only challenge. I had to confront myself, too. Years of ingrained patterns don't disappear overnight. I found myself in therapy, digging into my own issues, figuring out how to be a better partner, how to be a better person. Lucas and I started couples counseling as well. Those sessions were brutal at times. We walked out of some of them feeling emotionally raw, barely able to look at each other. But over time, things began to shift. We were learning how to communicate again, how to really listen. I was learning how to stand up for Lucas, not just to my family, but to anyone who dared belittle him. And Lucas, he was learning how to trust me again. There were setbacks, of course. Old habits don't die easily, and sometimes we'd find ourselves slipping back into old arguments. But we kept pushing forward, determined to make it work. The hardest test came about 2 months into our reconciliation. We attended a neighborhood barbecue, the first social event we'd gone to as a couple since we got back together. It was a nice afternoon, everyone laughing, talking. For a brief moment, it felt like we were normal again. But then Jake, the neighbor from down the street, had one drink too many and draped his arm over Lucas's shoulders. "So, Lucas," he slurred, grinning, When are you going to learn how to use a grill? Can't let the little lady do all the cooking, huh? I saw Lucas's posture tighten, the way his smile turned forced. This was my moment. This was my chance to show Lucas that things really had changed, that I had changed. Actually, Jake, I said, my voice louder than usual, Lucas is a fantastic cook. He makes the best stir-fry I've ever had. And for the record, I'm not a little. And Lucas doesn't need to man up. He's already more of a man than most people I know. The entire backyard went quiet. Jake blinked at me, his arm slipping off Lucas as he struggled to process what had just happened. And Lucas looked at me in disbelief, but also with something else, something like pride. Grace, you don't, Lucas began, but I wasn't finished. No, Lucas, let me say this, I said firmly. I turned back to Jake, who still looked stunned. Jake, I think you're a good guy. But if you ever talk to Lucas like that again, if you ever try to belittle him or question his manhood, you and I are going to have a serious issue. Got it? Jake mumbled something close to an apology, his face redder than the barbecue coals, and then stumbled away. As soon as he was gone, Lucas pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. Thank you, he whispered into my hair. You have no idea how much that meant to me. I pulled back, looking into his eyes. I meant every word, I told him, my voice steady. You are an incredible man, Lucas, and it's time the world knew it. Later that night, as we lay in bed, Lucas turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Grace, he began quietly, there's something I need to tell you. My heart skipped a beat. What is it? It's about Sophia, he said, hesitating slightly. My stomach churned at the sound of her name. Sophia, the neighbor. The woman he had stayed with after leaving me. What about her? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lucas took a deep breath and reached for my hand. I want you to know that nothing happened between us, but she did tell me she had feelings for me, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't think, for a moment, about what it might be like to be with someone who truly saw me, who appreciated me. The words hung heavy in the air. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice quiet. Because I don't want there to be any secrets between us, Lucas said, his tone firm but gentle. And because I need you to understand how close I came to giving up on us. But even in that moment, even when I was hurting and angry, I still loved you. I always loved you, Grace. You're it for me. You always have been. Tears filled my eyes, but this time I didn't hold them back. I leaned into Lucas, wrapping my arms around him, burying my face in his chest. I love you, I sobbed, my voice muffled against his shirt. I love you so much, and I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that again. Lucas held me tight, his voice thick with emotion. I love you too, Grace, and we're going to make it. I know we are. In that moment, I believed him. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it felt like we were walking it together, as equals, as partners. The next morning, I woke up before Lucas. I lay there for a few minutes, just watching him sleep, grateful for the chance we had been given. Eventually, I slipped out of bed and made my way to the kitchen. I had just finished making breakfast when Lucas wandered in, still half asleep. What's all this? He asked, glancing at the table full of food. I smiled, handing him a cup of coffee. Just breakfast, I said lightly. I thought we could eat together before work. Lucas took a sip, then set the cup down and pulled me into his arms, kissing the top of my head. Thank you, he murmured. For breakfast? I asked, confused. He smiled, shaking his head. For everything. For fighting for us. For changing. For loving me. I cupped his face in my hands, gazing up at him. Always, I whispered. I will always fight for us, Lucas. Always. As we sat down to eat, a sense of calm washed over me, steady and strong, and in that moment, nothing else seemed to matter. Goodbye.